I'm Brent Leary.
Paul Greenberg speaking to you from seriously compromised grounds.
Or you could just say, I like being in front of the green screen.
Yeah, but it's not. Look at behind it on each side of it.
Pay no attention to that,
The fake part.
whatever's
That's the stuff
behind
on
it.
the side's fake. The green screen's
There
the
it is.
only
Don't
thing
look
that's
at that.
real.
Look at us
Oh,
because we are the CRM players.
and that makes us what exactly?
Wow, we're tackling the tough questions already.
Well, it's the existential ones that occur.
We had a first, though. We had a first. I don't know who this is, but that was the first comment. And you know when
What?
this comment came in? 5 minutes before the show usually starts.
Really?
This is the first time we got a comment before the show started.
Oh, listen. Uh, is that Bob? You think?
Maybe it is.
Hey,
And
LinkedIn user, who are you?
yeah, please let us know.
And
Anyway,
wait. I got to answer Christy. No, Christy, on the green screen concept, it was let's aside from last minute, it was fine, except that the view of me is further out than the view I had of me. So it looked great until we zoomed out, and here we are.
oh, you know
Stuck.
what?
There we go. See, Christy got it right. Thank you,
But
Brent.
then I have to make sure I stay in the picture.
Well, I had so many things
Kind
go
of hard for
wrong
me
here.
to do. Yeah. I'm going to go back to this
Yeah,
because I need a little more room. I've been packing on the COVID weight, so I need a little bit more room to. All right. Now, third in line, Sven.
Wow, Sven. That's
But
almost disappointing.
well, it is, but he comes through with whatever that is.
Okay, now wait.
Halo
Hilo Mitron.
Mitten. Mitten?
Mitron?
Hello,
Mitron?
Mitten.
Oh,
I don't know what
mittens.
that means.
Hello, mittens.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. What I was explaining to you, Christy. Very well aware of the problem here. Let's
This
just
was
say.
Bob. So Bob was the first one. He was so anxious about today.
How's
He
that?
commented before we actually started.
How's that?
I don't know.
Hey, Christy, take that. I got it right now.
Bob F.
Almost.
Yeah, now she's saying you look great.
Oh, she's too. You know what? She derailed me completely. She's so kind.
She's kind.
She is. She's this wonderful, kind person.
Bob, if that is you, Bob, you've been LinkedIn user for at least the last several months. You must have done something. Or maybe LinkedIn doesn't like Boston sports.
That's me.
I don't know.
By the way, green screen thing.
Hindi.
That was Hindi. Wait, go back to that again.
Wait a minute. Your hair has a green tint.
Yeah.
Or is that
I'm not.
is that is that the headset?
No,
No, that's
the green
your
screen
hair.
showing through this terrible green screen thing. Look,
Wow.
psychedelic,
Oh my
man.
goodness. Is that the
Psychedelic.
StreamYard green screen?
Yeah, StreamYard green screen
Oh.
is terrible.
That is brutal.
Maybe I'll figure out one I can add sometime before this is over.
Absolutely. All right. So we do have a guest, and he's not going to be preempted.
Okay.
At least we think he isn't. We'll see. But it'll be on in a few minutes. But before we bring him on, did you notice I got a little something different going on here?
Cleveland Rams. Oh my God. 1948?
37.
37.
They moved to LA in 46.
46. Okay.
After winning the NFL championship in 45.
Wow. Cleveland, where the hell does Fanatics sell that?
No. Actually, I had to go to a specialty shop, customized stuff. They do teams that aren't around anymore.
Really? Can you point me to that link when you get a chance.
I will. I forget exactly what it's called at the moment, but and I got some more Cleveland Rams stuff coming in.
Oh, I can't.
I
I
love
actually
that.
can't wait to see that stuff.
Well, I love this. You know what? What's funny is I skipped the one city where we actually won the Super Bowl in. I don't really have anything that says St. Louis Rams.
Huh. Well, that's because you didn't
I
think
was
they
mad.
belonged. Right.
I was kind of mad.
They didn't belong in St. Louis in the first place.
No.
It was a
But
hijack.
the greatest show on turf in the Super Bowl. So I
Yep.
should really love the St. Louis Rams.
Yeah, I get it. I do
Yeah.
get it. You know,
Okay. So I wanted to take just a quick minute. Let's see how I can do this. Because we lost a mutual friend and someone that we really enjoyed, not doing engagements or not just doing engagements, but he was just a really good guy. Wilson Raj, who was a global director of customer intelligence over at SAS, um, passed away unexpectedly this week.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say, I just thought he was a really good guy, kind guy, smart,
Yep.
but more nice and kind than even he was intelligent. So I just wanted to do a quick shout out.
I completely. That was, it's funny when it happened, and the word started kind of traveling a little bit. It was weird because it was so unexpected that it was doubly devastating because I mean it's not that he was young, it was in his early 60s, but which shocked me because
That was a shock.
I think we
Yeah.
both have known him over a decade, and literally I thought he was in his 40s.
Yeah, I
Um,
do.
right. So,
Yeah.
but because he was this quiet but always vibrant guy, and to your point, the kindness was manifest. Um, everywhere, everything he did, everyone who knew him, I probably, if they were looking for the single descriptive word, it would have been that one, kind. And he's very good at his job. He always was. I remember when he first came to SAS years and years ago, um, he just immediately became important to the company, if you know what I mean. Immediately. And was, I don't know a single person who ever had a bad word to say about him. Um,
No.
So like you, it was just, oh my God, it actually threw me into a loop and a bit of a funk for a little while.
Yeah. He was kind and he was passionate about all this customer stuff, customer engagement, customer experience. So yeah. Anyway, we just wanted to pay a little tribute to Wilson.
And rest in peace, Wilson.
All right. So I wanted to bring up something else, but not that.
The infinity of life.
The infinity of life. So this week, Pega launched an actual magazine. It's digital, but it's also print, a full print magazine. They're calling it Go with an exclamation point on the end. And I don't know for whatever reason, but they invited me to be a part of their inaugural
picture.
I know. It's kind of hard to read all that. But so I'm there, Shelly Kramer and Adrian Swinsko.
I love that guy.
Yeah, they invited us to share a few thoughts as part of the magazine. And so, yeah, it's pretty cool. I like the idea that they're doing an actual print in addition to digital. Remember when Microsoft used to do those magazines? They had a lot of magazines.
Yeah, I was about to say they probably have 15 magazines.
Yeah, they had a lot. Do you think this is part of the move to be more than a technology company? We always talk about like what Salesforce is doing in terms of Salesforce Plus and the broadcasting and things like that. But when you look at what Peg is doing with the magazine, is this just another type of broadcast, or tech becoming publication, broadcast, whatever content in addition to what they do?
I think to some degree it's that. I think there's a recognition that tech companies need to create content in different forms and distribute it in different ways. But I don't know that. So there's some of the tech companies are recognizing. Wow, look at the light there. Some of the tech companies are recognizing that they also either are also partially a media company, or at least they have to have a media company inside their tech company. Those are the advanced ones. I think many companies are recognizing they need to utilize different formats, but don't necessarily treat that as a part of a, let's say, contemporary strategy aligned to the way the market's evolving, just that they need to produce things in a different way to be a little more visible and uh, and in how they distribute things. But I don't think the real differ like the differentiator between the companies is do you see yourself as a company as at least partially a media company or having to build a media company, or do you just see this as other ways to distribute content as part of your existing plan? And I think I don't know what Pega's story is right now personally, in terms of how they see it. I mean, that's to me really interesting given, and it does kind of point out something because, if you look at the general publishing industry, magazines are dying right and left everywhere. Doesn't mean they're not a viable format. They are a viable format when advertising isn't necessarily the driver of the magazine, right? Because they are a slick way of producing something of interest that is shorter in form per article, meaning than a book, than and something you can carry in your back pocket, which unless your iPad Pro fits in your back pocket, you can't really carry that there, in a matter of speaking. So, it's an interesting format. I like the idea. I mean, I'm intrigued by the idea. I don't know if it's gonna. I don't know how Peg is thinking about theirs. I don't know, and I know SAP still, I think, produces a couple of magazines, but they're very technical.
Right.
Um, and thus for me dry, but at the same time they have a very specific audience. I think again we're sort of in process. So you look at the more advanced companies. We are in part a media company. We're going to buy a media property. We're going to form a media company. One of those three conditions needs to apply, so to speak. And then other than that, companies are more aware of just different formats that they need to start producing within their existing strategy. And I think we're right in the midst of all of that, and it's very amorphous at the moment. And a few companies are beginning to emerge, and other companies are doing the experimenting. And I would put Pega, if I'm picking them, in the experimental stage right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first issue. You could go to their site, and I think you can get the PDF, and I guess you could probably register to get the print if you want to. But I haven't really gotten a chance to look through it all, just a couple of things, and I can't wait to get the actual physical because something tells me I want to see the design of the physical magazine. I want to see how it's laid out. I want to see kind of how it flows, what they're really going to do with it, and that will tell me a lot about where this thing is going to be positioned for them going forward. So we'll see. But I thought it was cool. I was really happy to be part of the initial one. Maybe we can do an NFT on that or something and make some
Sell it
money
for
off of it.
6 million. 6 million.
Yeah,
That's my number for all NFTs.
I want 6.5 million.
I think we take a picture of the
picture.
happy hour and then turn it into an NFT and sell it for 6.5 million and split the proceeds with everybody. Well, look, two salient points before we move on. One, I noticed that CRM magazine is about to issue its first physical issue since, well, for 2 years, basically,
Wow.
with the April issue of the 25th anniversary too of CRM Magazine. And by the
Oh,
way,
cool.
happy anniversary in
You know what?
April when the time
We
comes.
should we should get Bob on for the show
Yeah, let's do it.
for that. Let's do that.
25th anniversary of CRM Magazine show. We'll get Bob. And then the second thing, which is um, interesting, I think, the in the format side, one of the things I would highly reference as sort of somebody who's really done a good job is in terms of experimenting with format is one of your fellow um, thought leaders on that page, which is Adrian Swinsko with the book he just put out, Punk XL. The format, it's a book. It's an electronic book. There's physical copies. But the interesting thing is the format itself, which is very graphic and visual in combination, but it's not just infographic graphic. It's, you know, it's graphic novel, comic book graphic in addition, but not like how BAM, you know, bake a comic. It just utilizes the form to enhance the message around customer experience. And Adrian did a great job with that. And his guy Tom and Mark, I think, were his two designers. I'm not sure. I think it's Mark, but I know Tom for sure. And so, though, I mean, kudos to him for actually putting out a book that actually was handling kind of this new format for books that I think isn't necessarily going to be the only way books are done, but will be a significant way that they can be done in the future.
Okay. Our buddy, Digital Pestilence, is kind of setting us up to introduce our guest for today. In-person events have different needs these days. They are not content sharing anymore, or should not be. They are about people to people only.
Well, we know how we're going to start the whole thing.
So, with that in mind, why don't you do the honors of introducing
No, not again. This time you're doing it. There's no way I'm doing this again.
But you do such a good job, man.
Yeah, I did, didn't I? Last time.
I promise.
I did a great job. I don't believe
it's
you.
No surprise. We're not doing any additional tributes.
You
at least
go
today.
ahead and do the intro. I will not do the intro again. I just get this terrible feeling. No surprise, I swear. I fooled you again. Not about that, but about something else. It'll just be something else.
See, you got to do the intro because I have something else planned.
Oh, you mean it was a setup? Okay.
I'm only setting John up.
Oh, no, it works for me. Okay, so I'll say what I said almost that I said last time. Other than what? You know, so Jon Reed, what can you say? Look, John is the guy when it comes to me, at least, and I think to many in the industry and to many of the vendors in the industry, who is the ERP. Well, I'm going to make it more. Look, he may go under as John ERP, but he's really an enterprise technology person, and he is not only an enterprise technology person. He has depth, and he has breadth, and he has snark, and he has But the interesting thing about John is that aside from the power of his actual content and the words and the way he presents and the influence he genuinely has, he also has a very deep substance to what he says, and more often than not, as you know, combative as he can get, he happens to be right. It's not a matter of just combating for combat's sake. He's right about what he's saying, and he's I mean, he might have some fears I'm unaware of, but he's generally, at least as far as I can tell, fearless. I mean, maybe he has night sweats. I have no idea, but he's fearless, right, when it comes to dealing with vendors. But the thing is, he's not malicious. He's always presenting the knowledge of what the vendors, where's the holes, and what can be done to help. And plus, you know what else? He is a freaking great writer. He's just a great writer. And to me, he's my go-to when it comes to everything at the back end of the enterprise, everything, right? How he's going to take that when I said that. I can take it in multiple ways.
Well,
But
we can find out right now.
yeah,
how
let's
it's
do
gonna
that.
take.
Because let's bring that fella on.
I like to call him the bad boy of ERP, but he's
Jeez,
more than
guys.
that. Jon Reed.
You
Finally.
forgot to call me Bro Hammer. That was my
I
favorite.
was getting there, man. I was getting there, but that was going to be during the
A
show.
bro hammer.
I was gonna launch that one a little later, but of course you spoiled it completely.
Oh, sorry. I thought maybe you'd pass that by since it was so awesome last time. That was so
Never
great.
gonna forget it.
The Bro
Well,
Hammer. I love it, guys. Thanks.
It's great to have you here. And, you know, wait a minute. My phone's sorry. Wow. Things are falling.
You got a surprise
wait a
for me, Brent? You gonna spring
Yeah.
something on me?
I'm
Got a text-
nervous myself. I have no idea.
text message. John Biden wants to talk to us. Sorry, John. We're gonna have to push you to the side.
Oh, decoy again, man.
Nah, just having fun. All right, good to have you here. I have my first question though. I'm gonna bring this up because I gotta ask you about
You're
this.
already nailed, John. So
No, I gotta ask.
here's your bro hammer. Right, you can have it back.
So I've been watching and seeing this picture of you pretty much wherever you're being, promoted as being a part of something.
Yeah.
I just got to know, what the hell were you thinking? What were you looking at that put that face, that expression on your face? It doesn't look very happy or approachable. I just want to know what the hell you were thinking.
I think he was getting ready to do Gunfight with Clint Eastwood.
I think I had just been asked to cover a virtual event.
But that's a green screen background. No.
And I was like, I was taking the news kind of hard. I have no idea, but that was actually a professional photo shoot. And so, it's one of those things where you take like 50, 100 pictures and like usually one or two of them for whatever reason you like. And I just sort of, I don't know. I like that picture because I was like, yeah, I could grow into that picture a little bit. I could maybe
really could have been like the Clint Eastwood of ERP because he had this squinty thing going on.
Oh no, that was definitely Clint Eastwood. Step aside because I'm gonna gun you down if you don't. Without any question.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me. This is a topic I'm really passionate about, and I have some exclusive content for your peeps. I'm gonna lay out a bunch of stuff I haven't ever put in print before. So this is like debut stuff. So
cool.
In other words, he's using our audience as guinea pigs.
Yeah.
That's right.
There is a downside to that, I suppose, right? I could get booed off the stage, right?
I imagine that's why you're flashing all these strobe lights at people right now.
Yeah, pretty much.
Get them ready for this. All right. So why don't we start with, though, Esteban's already willing to battle you, it looks like, on hybrid events. That's his first take. So.
Oh, and he has another take too, if you want to put that up here.
Yeah.
The world has gone visual when done properly.
Virtual events.
All right. So your thoughts on those two things?
Yeah.
I don't disagree with either one of those, and they kind of fit into my whole thing. I've kind of developed sort of a methodology around this that I'm gonna walk through a little bit today. I agree with both Esteban's points. I do think in-person events, there's some crossover between people and content. But we, more than ever, we crave like interaction. That's why we go. And unfortunately, it puts us at odds with event producers. But let me kind of start at the top here. I'm coming in a little hot. I'm a little ticked off right now, but this is a message of opportunity. It's a message of hope, but I am pissed off. So I'm going to start by explaining why I'm pissed off, and then we'll get to the hope and opportunity if that works for you.
Any way you want.
So just to be clear too, I do have a background in creative event design, so that goes back a long time. And I also bring another bias, which is I've actually participated in a number of pretty transformational online events this year. Not enterprise related for the most part. But that's impacted my thinking a lot because so many people want to kind of say, oh, I can't wait till we'll be back together again. And I don't disagree, but I also want to say, you've really missed out on what you could have accomplished the last couple of years to bring people closer together in the meantime. And you're going to need those skills going forward. So those are a couple of biases. And then also, having had some health issues the last couple of years, I think I'm a little extra sensitive to the sort of stampede to get people back into quote unquote normal.
Amen.
Before normal is particularly like safe. So I feel like in some sense, I've kind of found myself sort of representing the views of people who feel that normal feels kind of risky and they don't like being excluded from stuff that's happening on the ground. So I think those things kind of color my perspectives. But the bottom line is that we're entering another event season and we're not in a good place with hybrid events. And given the state of Omicron right now and COVID in general, we're just not where we should be. And that's really unfortunate. And the end result is we're putting people in really tough places as far as their risk tolerance, whether they want to miss out on events or not. And it's kind of sad to me because I've been harping on this stuff for a couple of years now. There's been a lot of opportunity to get better, and we just haven't. I'm not going to name this show, but some people can guess. There's a big show going on in New York right now that a lot of folks are going to be pulling out of, and they had no hybrid plan. They had no virtual plan. They had no plan to engage people beyond let's have this stampede into Manhattan to be on the ground together. And I just think it's kind of sad. Like it was imminently avoidable in the sense that we could have had a much better format. And they're hardly the only ones. They're just the latest example of that.
Well,
and
let me just put it out there because we're not beholden to anybody. You're talking about what, the NRF, the big show?
There you go.
Absolutely. Yep. We can call them out.
There you go. All right. Well, that's all good. And so the question becomes, well, how do we get how do we get to this problematic point? And I think it's an important issue. So we got here because event planners were largely treating virtual events as a stopgap. And there was this thing around as soon as we get back to normal. I found it particularly frustrating because it did not take a genius to see that the challenge of global vaccination was going to create an opportunity for variants that would extend pandemics. That did not take a genius to see that coming. So I was a little frustrated with this notion of virtual events as stopgaps. And also vendors, I think, lack the skills for creative event design. They're not that hard, but there's a learning curve and they weren't eager to learn those. But here's the other problem. On the ground events were already broken. So on the ground events, there was always this uneasy trade-off between the vendor gets to control the event and the messaging, including, by the way, bloated 3-hour keynotes. And the bonus was you got to see your friends. And so that kind of evened things out. And so what you did was you hustled to get the information you needed if you couldn't get it. And to Esteban's point, you reached out to your peeps, you found your peeps, and you put up with some of the stuff that didn't really work that well. But when vendors took that format virtually, that became a huge problem because the virtual was just the branded core of the on the ground, but there was no way for us to hustle around the fringes and make the connections. The platforms didn't support it. The vendors didn't enable it. And we found ourselves with these deeply unsatisfying virtual events that made us all deeply cynical. And we couldn't wait to get back to so-called normal again. And that's kind of what we ran into. And it was really unfortunate because now we're in kind of this jam. We're in dire need of better hybrid events. We're not ready yet. But there were some bright spots and we did learn. It's not like we're static. We've gotten a little better in certain ways. And I'll share a couple of those examples. A lot of vendors used what I call the platform excuse and said, oh, there's no platform that enables great large-scale events right now. But my research has shown that that's not actually true. Right. And one of the reasons is, a lot of seed money is going to make the platforms better right now. But the good news is the best hybrid events right now don't really necessarily need perfectly amazing platforms. And I'll explain why that is. But here's the good news, and then I'll stop and let you guys comment. If we learn how to pull this off, what we're going to get is we're going to get better hybrid events. We're going to have a better fallback for any regional outbreaks. We're going to have better options for attendees who can choose based on their risk tolerance without feeling like they're going to miss out. And then I think we can also kind of extend this virtual inclusiveness that Esteban's referring to throughout the year. And by the way, that's going to get you a lot better data, and it's going to allow you to include a lot of people in your events who weren't ever going to make it on the ground for either they're differently abled, physically they can't get there, or for whatever reason they're international. So there's a real upside here as well, but I felt like I needed to start by kind of hammering home a little bit of the grim side of this because it's just frustrating me right now.
Well, I mean, and I can't agree with you more. I mean, the irony too, and it makes it even slightly more frustrating, and it kind of goes to part of your point, is that if you take a look over the last, let's call it year, because 2 years ago it was clear nobody was prepared to do it at all. But say the last year, you had moments during virtual events which did work, and you felt it too. You knew it, and you came out. Depends on energized or happy, but one way or the other, it had exactly both the emotional and intellectual impact it was supposed to or should have, and but they were moments, and they were
Right.
not. It was not institutionalized in any way. They were not. They weren't planned particularly. They said, "Okay, we'll do this. See how whatever what happens happens," and it would work. And then they would say, "Okay, well, we'll do this next," without saying, "Wait, that worked. Let's see what we can do to integrate this. See if it'll work on this scale, blah blah blah." They didn't learn from it, and that was one thing that frustrated the hell out of me because we would go through those moments where, wow, that was great. I mean, we can see some of them from because all three of us tend to be on pretty much the same analyst events, and there's the back end of some of the analyst events would work occasionally. To your point, though, there were also things that clearly didn't work, and the 3 hour speech never worked. But also, what doesn't work? An opening keynote that's a theoretical conversation between people.
Right.
It's a keynote, okay? It's not meant to be that. It's meant to be. There's a reason for those things. So, there's certain things that work, certain things that don't. But nobody learned lessons from them. They just sort of went on to the next thing or ignored what they just had. And I think that's the part. I think to me it just pointed it up so blatantly. And I know you've in some of the material you wrote on the hybrid stuff you did, the stuff you did when it came to you and Paul Richards, all of those things. You were, without putting it exactly in that frame, you were always noting that no one learned. You don't have to learn from your mistakes. You can learn from your successes too.
Absolutely. Preach. What do you think, Brent?
Well, I like that. He's doing a Steve Gilmore.
Doing a Steve Gilmore.
Yeah, things I would ask you is, so we give them pretty much a pass on 2020. They were scrambling, just trying to make, I guess, chicken salad out of
turkey
in the blank. So we kind of understood that. 2021, it felt like maybe a few of them thought more outside the box in terms of not scrambling, but really thinking about how they could take advantage of what some of these platforms have, to give them. And of course, now we're going to see what happens this year. But do you think, or maybe what percentage of the companies that are doing these events do you think have gone from, oh, we just have to, fill the void until we can get back to what we were doing before? How many people or those companies do you feel have shifted from that to realizing, oh, this isn't going away? We really have to figure out not only how can we do these, but how does that integrate into everything else we do to make it a full cohesive strategy and not just filling gaps or trying to make it easier to do the things that we want to do because we've done them, all along.
Yeah, so I think unfortunately the reason why the 2021 events weren't as good as we had hoped is because by that time vaccinations were happening or starting to happen, and folks were thinking, well, we're almost back on the ground again. And so they treated this whole thing as a stopgap, which was a massive failure of imagination on what was possible. And that still hasn't changed. I still hear from executives every day saying, once we get past this surge, we'll be back together again and all this crap. And what I don't hear is like, why haven't we learned anything around how to do this better? We've learned how to do better work remotely. Why can't we learn how to do better events? I don't understand. And so like what's needed is a fundamental change in event philosophies. And what it's driven by is an understanding that messaging and branding is not at the core of what you need out of an event. In the age of SaaS software, which is about renewing and upselling software, communities sell software. Communities about relationships. Events are about building and fostering those relationships. That's the goal of an event. That's exactly what Esteban was saying in the chat earlier. When you embrace that philosophy, then you rethink both your on the ground and your hybrid events, and you come up with new possibilities. And there's actually some methodology around this that's developed. So you're not starting from scratch here. And in a few minutes, I'll be happy to go into a few things that I've learned around how to pull these events off at a reasonable scale and stuff. But we also have some really good chat comments here. So I don't know which way you want to go.
You want to hit one up with your buddy
Brian?
Brian?
With your buddy. You guys can do a routine while you're at it.
Well, you know, Brian's talking about the plasticity of slick pre-recorded keynotes and as substitute for real content and a chance for interaction. And yeah, Brian, you're right. I mean, look, I mean, the opportunities for interaction in a lot of these settings have been like massive failures. And look, I mean, this notion of like a recorded library is really discredited. I mean, how much content do we have on YouTube now, even for enterprise people? I mean, you could spend your whole day watching older events and getting all the content you could ever possibly need. And, you know, at one point we're going to wake up and realize that that's not really going to help. I mean, yeah, occasionally pre-recorded presentations can be useful as supplemental material, but that's not why we're here. Well, we got a lot of comments here. Pandemic to endemic is a mind shift and a policy shift. It's a habit shift that is going to take long. Yeah, Esteban, it is going to take a long time, but you know, I think it's time to really get started and to stop with these hypotheticals around, oh, soon we'll be back together again and we'll be back to the same, you know, kind of problematic events. I made fun in my most recent piece. I made fun of this notion of like, we're trying to network and you're rolling out DJs that are drowning out all of the networking opportunities by trying to make us feel like we're like at the hip capital of the world, like being entertained. And that's how
take it a little easy on the DJs. I mean,
hey man, I mean, there's a time and a place for DJs. If you want to have an evening, of DJs, that's great. But if you want to drown out the networking that I flew halfway across the country to receive, like, what are we doing? Like, I'm not trying to be a hipster, you know, like those days are past. I tried that. It didn't work. That's why I'm here. You know, it's like, we're not Instagram influencers here. Like, that's not why we're getting, at least I don't think we are. I'm sorry if I'm sold you guys short on your Instagram reach.
Well, let me ask you this. Give us a good example of a company that has built from 20 to 21 and where you think they're going in 22 with their hybrid events.
Yeah, so there's different companies, and I'll name a few. So I don't want people to think I'm sidestepping, but I just want to provide a little bit of context here. There's a really big difference in event design between large scale annual type events and smaller type events. And the hybrid considerations for both are really very different. And so we should probably tackle each in turn. The thing about the large scale events is now you have to be realistic about how to serve up at scale what people need. I mean, one interesting example on large scale was SAP TechEd. I don't think they've quite gotten this right yet, but one interesting thing, the first year when they did their whole preview with me and got my advice, I expressed concern about the amount of sessions they were doing. It seemed like they wanted to like do hundreds and hundreds of sessions. And I was just so much more interested in like, you know, the interactive possibilities. But one thing they did do the first year that they carried over the next was this room they called Channel 1. And it was kind of a drop-in room that was kind of, they had a studio, but it was kind of informal and they would have community discussions. And it was also kind of like a play-by-play thing around like, hey, over here, here's this event that's about to happen. So what it did is it was an inclusive kind of drop-in for people to just check in on what's happening with the event. I'm really, really surprised that more vendors haven't tried something like that.
Creatio has done some things like that.
What's that?
Creatio has done a couple of things like that.
Yeah. It's you see it occasionally. And one thing that Thomas Grassel and his team told me coming in to the second year for this year is that they really scaled down the amount of content they were trying to produce and didn't worry so much about that. And we're going to focus much more on these like more drop-in interactive elements, more workshop-y type formats and stuff. And so, but one thing they said is like, you know, we've learned this great lesson around this because we were trying to reach all these non-SAP developers with this show in Vegas on the ground, and it wasn't reaching a lot of the constituents. And now with this more virtual format, we're reaching a lot of people we never could have reached before. And so, this learning curve they were embracing was teaching them some valuable things. And, I was just hoping for more examples along those lines. But one thing I would kind of point out around this large scale type of event is that what I came to understand is that not everyone wants or needs an interactive event. And so the way you start to conquer some of this hybrid stuff is by thinking about, well, how can we create kind of a very inclusive broadcasting stream for those who just want to consume some stuff. So like, for example, how can we stream everything on YouTube that we possibly can, make it very frictionless? Maybe you have signups for like replays, but so you have this frictionless broadcasting thing going on, but then why not create like a VIP format for those that really want that interactive event experience of a real live experience, like a can't miss. I want to be there. I want to talk with executives. I want to talk with customers. And why can't we have this VIP format? And you might even pay for that, or you might not charge attendees for that, but it's going to be a smaller scale thing. And then suddenly it's more manageable because now the interactive component doesn't have to be for thousands of people. It just has to be for whatever 50, 100, 200, 300 people want that heavily interactive experience. And I went through one of those with Paul Richards and his team over at HuddleCam HD, who Paul's taught me a lot about this. And you can see some of my content with Paul on my site,
Very good
Diginomica. But it was amazing to watch what they did with their event because they had this VIP stream. And so what would happen was when people rolled off the keynote stage, the keynoters would come backstage and hang out in the VIP stream. And so you had guys like Joe Pine, the author of The Experience Economy, rolling backstage, and suddenly you're chatting with Joe Pine informally with a bunch of other super interesting people. And then the other keynoter rolls off stage, and now they're having dialogue, and like people that don't even interact with each other that much are shooting the breeze and like fighting about stuff. And you're like, wow, this is like unscripted perfection. And the interesting thing there is like, is the event organizer all stressed out because you're not watching the keynote because you're talking instead of watching the keynote? No, they're not, because they know that what's happening is gold, and the relationships and the interaction is gold. So they've let go of this thing around, oh no, while the keynote's streaming, we have to like, and I mean, it's something you guys have done with some of your watch parties, where it's like, let's have a little fun. Let's cook some popcorn up and like, let's inject a little bit of life and humor and context like amid these events. And so it's like you guys are kind of creating a bit of that hybrid piggyback, but vendors should be doing more of that themselves.
Yeah, the problem that you do see as a result of them not doing it is you get the worst of both. So for example, and this is one of my pet peeves that I've mentioned on the show a million times, but you watch a speech, let's say at any given user conference, and there's a chat window on the right, and there's a moderator for the chat window, and speech goes on. At the end of the speech, let's say there's 215 comments. Somebody says, "How do we do?" Said, "We have 215 comments." They're going, "Oh, that's great. That's fantastic." And then you go and look at the comments. Hello from Singapore. Hello from Toledo. Hello from Atlanta. Hello from Manassas. Hello.
Yeah.
You get some great geographic data, and then even worse, one person raises an appropriate interactive kind of, meaning they actually want to talk to the speech in some way, and they mention something, and the moderator goes, "Oh yeah, we have a track on that tomorrow. Go here." They don't even encourage the speech. They just operate like traffic cops. So you basically have moderators who are traffic cops and people who are just saying hi, and that's considered a success because even the way they're measuring the metrics are completely wrong. Right. And so I think if you do it, say, let's take your example, and you separate VIP out from just content consumed, you won't get that anymore. And but that's the hybrid, horrible, mutilated child of not having either of them, right?
Well, you know what?
Appropriately.
I remember 2020 and I think 2021 with Pega. Remember they, as part of their keynote, and they had a very tight, not long at all, but what they did was a session or segment where Alan Treffler literally did interactive Q&A moderated by Don Shurman.
Right. And it was with
I thought that was
whoever
really
wanted to
cool.
communicate too.
Right. And those are the kinds of things that they should, integrate into these things, because people, they want not only, hi from whatever, but if they have a legitimate question or something comes up during the keynote and they would like to pursue that a little bit, I think it's great for these folks to set some time aside. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of challenges because there could be thousands of people that want to get this opportunity, but you're going to have to factor that in somehow and address it in some form or fashion. Maybe it's multiple ways, but that's what people want. They don't just want engagement, they want meaningful engagement. And that's why a lot of us go to those events, and that's why our customers go. I can't recall how many times I've heard people say, I don't really go to sections or sessions during these events. I go for the networking. I go for the actual engagement, and they have to figure that part out.
Yeah, totally. And like I was saying, there's a skills component to that, like being skilled enough to facilitate those sessions, being skilled enough to spot the nuggets of gold, the comments that need to be brought in front of executives, and then having a process in place where the executives are willing to spend airtime with answering offsite questions. And to Esteban's point here, people don't care about the content, they care about engaging and interacting. And and you see it at certain things. We saw it at Refresh, as Thomas is pointing out. There are some shining examples of this. What's lacking is a sustainable commitment to that really is reinforced by a vendor that says we're going to invest in the skills that we need to do it. And part of it is because a lot of the people who have these skills inside of vendors are these so-called low-level community managers who do amazing work in communities, and they're underpaid and under-recognized, but they're great at dealing with things like trolls, at dealing with BS. A lot of those skills translate very effectively to online facilitation. Yes. Mm-hmm. But these people were already snowed under. They're not paid well. They're not celebrated. But guess what? They're instrumental in building the vibrant community that ensures that you're going to get renewals on your software. So if you start changing your paradigm around what skills matter and what KPIs matter, then the events start getting a whole lot better.
All right. So given that, what's your method?
Well, like I said, I mean, I think the biggest thing is to start thinking about how do we ensure that our biggest events have a hybrid component of some kind, and then how do we then ensure that throughout the year we're reinforcing those relationships through a series of either virtual or regional events that essentially maintain some community continuity throughout the year. And so essentially the method is sort of a combination of the two. And then depending on the type of event, you figure out what the best hybrid structure is. And I think sometimes companies are intimidated because they think, well, hybrid means we have to broadcast all the sessions on the ground. That's not necessarily the case. Right. You might not actually broadcast any of the sessions on the ground, but you might have a room dedicated to virtual attendees where your executives and customer panels gather and just interact with the hybrid, with the online audience. So you might not even try to even stream your existing sessions, or alternately, you might just pick one room that you're going to stream from and just start there. I think people have been overly intimidated by this notion that, oh, well, now everything has to be live streamed. Well, I know enough about event Wi-Fi and event video, and you guys do too, that you have to start small with that stuff. Right. And not get too crazy. But then it's a matter of kind of examining all of your events to figure out how they're going to work. So for example, I've had some interaction with a number of vendors around their analyst events, which are a form of VIP events. Yeah. Now, the analyst events are similar in the sense that you could have similar events for VIP customers, for VIP partners, but they're smaller events. And when you take a look at them, you realize that they don't translate that well to hybrid, in the sense that if I'm sitting in a room all day at an analyst event in an exotic location like the wine fields of Northern California, and then some poor analyst is calling in through a friggin' old school speakerphone and you can hear their voice chiming in, well, that's not a good virtual experience. No. And so in that case, what you start to think about is maybe with some smaller events like that, maybe we actually conduct a totally separate event for virtual attendees that is catered to their needs, because virtual analyst days, for example, you can't like put someone in a virtual room for 8 hours and expect them to pay attention. It's not going to happen. But you can still potentially do that on the ground. Now, as we were talking, you start by sort of redesigning all of your events with the ultimate goal of relationship building and community and networking in mind. And so then you start thinking about, well, maybe putting analysts into a heated, like, echo chamber for 8 hours isn't such a good format either. But the point is, you can get away with that maybe on the ground, because then you take the analysts out to a really nice meal. You cannot get away from that virtually and send someone like a Grubhub coupon.
I know they do that.
And like hope for the best,
Right.
So
Here's your cocktail mixing kit.
So it's actually quite energizing to start redefining these events with different end goals in mind. But I understand that it's scary for vendors, because it means they have to go off script. It means they have to expose their executives to more sort of like unbridled scrutiny. But some of that is really beneficial. I mean, Thomas mentioned the Refresh program. I remember really enjoying the Ask Me Anything analyst session with the CEO, which instead of some kind of overly scripted fireside chat crap format, they basically just opened up the CEO to take in, questions from analysts all over the country. Oh, and by the way, they had some in the same room too, so they were able to pull off a hybrid. And Alan Berkson, who was part of that team, is actually in the chat now. So these things can be done. I think what we haven't seen, though, and what you guys have alluded to, we have bright spots, but we can't point to anyone really, I think, who's consistently executing on that, where you say, man, I never want to miss their events, because those events are just great. Like, it's more like, oh, I'll catch the recordings later, and if I have time, and blah, blah, blah.
So,
well, I will say this.
Okay, after you, I got something.
Okay.
Oh, no,
I've seen some great, at least virtual, but I do think they were hybrid events. But me taking the experience virtually, I guess. I would say Apple, they do an incredible job. NVIDIA did a really good job.
Yep. I heard good things about both those shows. Yep.
Yeah. And it would be, I'm trying to think, if I had, in the traditional things that we tend to go through, I think maybe Adobe, or it would be between Adobe and Salesforce with Dreamforce, that came the closest to those experiences.
Adobe Max.
Yeah, Adobe Max.
Right.
Adobe, the second one that we went to.
Right.
With that said, even those felt a long ways off from the NVIDIA's and the Apple events. Why do you think our industry events don't seem to be able to get to the experiences that are created from maybe the more consumer-oriented companies?
This is going to come as a huge shock to you, especially since I just wrote a piece about how B2C and B2B content strategy is totally different, which, by the way, might be a fun topic for us to take up in the spring sometime. But because your buddy Jesus is debating me on that, which has been really fun. But anyhow, but yeah, like, so B2C customers are better at customer experience. Sorry, they are.
But isn't this the opportunity, given what's going on, for companies that aren't B2B to actually equal, or dare I say, even leapfrog them in certain aspects, if they would just be open to it?
Totally agree. I think it can be a little tricky, because trying to mimic what Apple does can be really difficult. And I write a lot about the perils of trying to entertain too much, and get too worked up about production values, because I don't think that's at the heart of what we crave in the B2B world, as much as we crave interaction and authentic dialogue and things like that. But I'm not going to sit here and say that entertainment is never a good thing. I just think that a lot of what comes off as entertainment in B2B is more like unscripted conversations like these, where you don't know what the hell John or Brent or Paul is going to say next. That's a big deal, I think, because so much B2B stuff is so polished. But yeah, I mean, I do think you can also invest in better production values at times, and also just thinking about from the vantage point of, like, what are we trying to get across here? Like, are we trying to get across message, or are we trying to create an experience, which is, I think, what you hit on that's really core to this. I think the Apples of the world, they think about, let's create an experience for anyone who shows up at this, right? Which is like this thing around, like, this live threshold of like, does this meet the live threshold of I'm going to get my bunny slippers on, I'm going to get scrubbed and cleaned, and I'm going to be in front of my computer at this time because I don't want to miss this. And I think that's where we're falling down. And there's probably a lot of ways to get there. I'm just not seeing enough of them yet.
Well, all right. So to that point, for years, all of us have been speaking in public. We've given speeches at events and so on and so forth, large crowds, small crowds. I don't know about you, and I'm pretty sure what I'm about to say pretty much is what we all think. Maybe wrong.
Patriots.
Well, that we know. It's not that we think. That's only two of us think.
I don't think two.
Right. Right. So, but here's the thing. When I first began speaking, I just tried to cram as much stuff in as I could because I wanted to solve everyone in the audience's problems. And needless to say, that never happened. So then I realized after a while that if I'm going to be on a stage for 45 minutes and I try to solve everyone's problems and I end up, one guy comes up to me at the end and says, you solved my problem. And let's say there were 500 people in the audience, that's 499 people who weren't listening because they didn't care about what I was saying because it didn't do anything for them. So I realized, all right, the only thing I'll be able to do on a stage is get across key points that I need to get across so that they have something to think about when they walk away. And at the same time, do it in a way that they're both entertained and thinking. Meaning everyone knows the value of when someone's happy, blah, 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 thinking, retention, all that. But the reality is that's pretty much, I don't think that that's any different than what I'll say double down on that. For one of the things I just completed was a 3,000 word article for a vendor, which will be out in a month maybe on the ramping up the B2B customer experience. It was literally, that's what it was about. It was from a different perspective than what we're talking about, but one of it reminded me of the historic point that we've made many times. And again, I don't know what you think of this one, John. I know Brent and I have talked about it, but at the end of every B is a C, meaning there's an actual human being who's thinking about
Absolutely.
making decisions, and consequently, and they are consumers just like every other human on the planet who has a job or who doesn't have a job, and they have certain things they do as consumers which they enjoy doing, and and the way they buy and the way they purchase, the way they consume content, all of those things. Let's face it, since in the entire century that we're in now, we've seen the bleeding of that kind of thinking into the B2B universe. And, we used to talk about the consumerization of the enterprise, whatever, consumerization of business, but it's pretty much the same thing. So given what you're talking about, and given, I would probably give more credence to production values than you do and entertainment than you do, maybe. But I get where you're coming from, but at the same time, I do think that that's part of what people want to see and do, and it helps them. Look, let's put it this way. The one thing I don't think has changed is this, that in a year, if somebody says to me, whether I was physically at Sapphire or I was virtually at Sapphire, says, what was the theme of Sapphire? The only comment I'll probably make to them is, let's presume it was a really good conference, which I'm not presuming, but let's presume it was. My only comment I'll make to them is, I don't remember the theme, but I really had a good time. I really enjoyed it.
Totally. Just a few quick things on production values. Just one example of it. I've been on a few different panels for events the last 2 years. The rehearsals for those panels were all better than the final result. The reason being that
I'm not talking about that.
The rehearsals were more informal and authentic, and the final result in a B2B context was everyone worrying about lighting and makeup and production values. So that's why I hammer that a little bit. I would also say, would you rather watch a highly produced keynote of Mark Benioff and Brett Taylor on stage? Or would you rather have an informal Zoom discussion with the two of them with 30 or 40 or 50 other VIPs? You'd take the Zoom discussion every time. So and look, I'm not saying that production and entertainment doesn't matter, because if you do it well, it's awesome. And look, I mean, look at my microphone, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, so I'm paying attention to, there's a certain level where you have to think about that stuff. But like, the thing that I worry about is that sometimes we get obsessed with, oh, let's mimic consumer shows by being heavily entertaining. And I just don't think that's at the heart of the problem.
I agree with you there.
And we have to remember that when we're competing on entertainment, we're also competing with Netflix, Hulu, and anything else you might watch at home. And so there's a lot of really good shows on some of those channels that I might prefer to watch. And so I always say that B2B content should try to compete, especially on relevance and not quite as much on entertainment. But it's probably worthy of another show to really truly get into all of that, because Sven asked about why we even talk about B2B versus B2C. And just to tease a future show, I would say you have to understand that the purchasing processes are still very different in many cases. And that's what dictates some different thinking, because you have to understand what the buyer's journey and the buyer decision-making process is like. And the fact that as a consumer, I could be influenced to buy some friggin' erectile dysfunction thing on TV because like some ball hero is endorsing it, which happens all the time, into an impulse purchase. That type of thing doesn't happen in B2B. And so because there's no impulse marketing in B2B, you have to take a step back and think differently. But B2C has been incredibly influential on this whole discussion, as far as, just as Paul said, the whole user experience. And I think you're 100% right about. So I think it's important to make those distinctions, so then we can have a clash and a discussion around just how much the lines are blurring, because I do think the lines are blurring.
Actually, just one last thing on your point, and I think this is really important. What you just said is critical. I'm agreeing with you 100%. When I'm thinking production values, I'm not thinking rehearsals, and I literally once I accidentally sat in on an IBM C-level exec rehearsing his speech, where we rehearsed an ad hoc joke. And I was sitting with he literally was rehearsing it while I was hearing it. When the actual speech occurred, I was sitting next to a journalist. Some of you might know Alex Williams. Remember Alex? Right? I was
yeah. So
I was sitting next to Alex.
Everyone should read the new stack. It's good stuff.
I love Alex. He's brilliant. And so I'm sitting next to Alex, and I said, we're getting close to the ad hoc joke, and I'm saying, you know what? I bet this guy, there's something funny here. I hope he can come up with some joke. I think he's gonna. And he did. And Alex was like, how the hell did you, like, it was he's rehearsed an ad hoc joke. Okay.
Yeah.
And those things are horrible. That's just scripted crap. I'm literally talking about, look, for me, the standpoint of production values it's only got two purposes. One is to be sufficient to not distract, or to be complementary to and enhance. But it's never the driver. It's never the focus. But it has to be good enough so that somebody says, sorry, your audio broke up or your video froze.
Yeah.
And on the other side of it is sometimes, the entertainment value and also just the enhancement value with NVIDIA and Apple. I mean, they're geniuses at making you go, wow. And you look at the content is B2B-ish, right? But it's content that's supported by and enhanced by the graphical, by the design and by the effect. And I think that, like, one of the reasons I'm sitting in my office rather than the studio, my PC has some sort of weird problem. It keeps booting back to the BIOS, and I'm not sure what's going on. So I jumped in here, threw up a green screen so you didn't see the mess behind me, which is cameras, including the PTC optics camera that Paul Richards sells. And I just threw up a green screen to have cover, and I have decent enough lighting. So I basically just wanted to be in, let's not distract, right? And so other than that, I would have had problems, right? So that's what I'm saying. And to me, that's what I mean when I'm talking production values. I think those are very important. I think the scripting and the other stuff is horrible. I think people need to take a unconference view of those things.
Well, and I think what's really interesting, I don't know if you guys agree, but like when you think about what's entertaining right now in a B2B context, like with keynotes, a lot of vendors seem to want to put on this big virtual show, razzle dazzle. But what I think of is, what I tune into is the CEOs that are can't miss, right? the guys and gals who they're just they don't give a F anymore. They're gonna say whatever they want to say. So I'm gonna watch a Larry Ellison keynote. I'm gonna watch a Hasso Plattner keynote. I'm gonna watch a Benioff keynote because I don't know what they're gonna say, and neither do their handlers. And their handlers are sitting at the front of the stage saying,
Exactly.
"Please don't go off script. Please
do
don't go off script." And every time they go off script, and that's why you watch. And there's probably some others. Those are just
Alan Trefler.
Alan
there
Trefler,
you go.
exactly like that.
There you go.
He's hilarious.
And so like that to me is like effective entertainment in a B2B context. If you want to talk about a keynote, is giving people permission to just do what they want to do and they don't give a F.
Yeah.
And then you have some entertainment.
I 100,000% with you. Ultimately, you're looking for somebody who just talks. They say what they talk. That's it. They're not following. They're not following somebody else's.
Totally unfiltered.
Yeah, they just talk. And who doesn't love those? Even if you disagree with them, just love the fact that that outrageous. Right?
Hey guys, just real quick, Alan Berkson had a question around whether singular events have a purpose anymore. Alan, I would say, are singular events still valuable? I believe they are, but as per our discussion today, I think they're much more valuable in the context of an overall strategy. And you have to think about what that overall strategy is and how you're going to measure the success of that strategy. And I guess I'm arguing for community-based metrics, like Salesforce has metrics around how participation in community affects purchasing and upselling on products. And they found very positive correlations. So once you find those positive correlations between community and upselling, oh, and by the way, you can probably have some between community and support as well. Once you develop those KPIs, then all your events can serve into that. And you think about it. One thing I told an analyst event planner once was, don't do a brain dump on us today. Like, I remember making fun of one vendor. I was like, we're already at 50 slides and only 15 minutes into your first presentation. It's like, don't do a brain dump. I was like, think about relationships as the context for information. The stronger our relationship, the more we're going to share information. Like Brent and I have become really good friends, which, by the way, Brent, has been one of the really wonderful things that's happened to me the last few years in our space. And so now Brent and I have all this back and forth around video, and we're talking about some AI stuff. So the point is, the relationship becomes a context for all the information exchange that makes us both smarter. Well, at least makes me smarter. Brent could speak for himself. But if we think about relationships as the containers for knowledge sharing, then we're on to something. And then we don't have to stress out around, oh my God, we have to cover all this content today before people tune out. And then you have a totally different event objective.
I would also just follow up and say, we always have to say all credit goes to Sandy Lowe for hooking us up now that we're buddies.
Sandy, woohoo.
But
I think she's watching right now, by the way.
She may be.
I hope so.
She's doing okay. It seems like now more than ever, hybrid, virtual, whatever, I think these companies really have to start thinking even more so beyond the event. For instead of trying to fit everything in to the event, they need to just make sure that they connect content or opportunities or sessions that they could continue the engagement, because it seems like at least up until now, it's all about the event. And even when it's all about the event, John, as you said it, I think perfectly, even pre-pandemic, the events were broken. So you have to, this is the opportunity that these companies have to fix their vision and their view beyond an event, whether it's hybrid, totally physical, or totally virtual, but also consider, what do you really want to continue the engagement? What do you need to do? How do you need to view things so that the event is not the end all? It's really the beginning for a full year's worth of engagement.
Bingo.
Oh, and look, you're right. She was listening.
And I just need to cut off the slide dependency. Yeah, absolutely.
That's
welcome,
okay.
Sandy. Hi, Sandy.
All right.
Hey, Sandy.
All right. So we kind of let that one go supersized because it was a really good conversation and there's a lot of good engagement. maybe these companies should take that into consideration.
Put it
Maybe.
in your book.
Yeah, right.
I have a whole series on this topic on Diginomica, and I'd love to hear from anyone in the chat. If I didn't answer your question, just find me LinkedIn or Twitter, whatever.
Why don't
We'll
you
follow up.
put up the links?
Please do. And
Oh, we did have that a while back. I think Thomas. Well, people should go
Thomas,
to the
yeah,
comment
Thomas
section. It's there.
Yeah, Thomas posted a link to my B2B, B2C content strategy thing, which is part of this series I'm doing on the informed B2B buyer, which inflames the debate around B2B and B2C, which I think we might want to revisit sometime in the spring, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
Well, and another thing, John and I have been really talking about as us, separately, individually, but generally speaking, as everybody is going to some form of video, whether it's live stream or recorded, it becomes really of great importance to find those nuggets in those videos, those long form videos, and use them to not only hammer a moment or a piece of that conversation, but that also should trigger even more interest in the long form. And so we need to have that conversation about why that's so hard and why it hasn't been a part of the experiences that we just talked about, because this is definitely part of what I would think would be the ongoing engagement coming out of these events, or helping folks get to the core of the things that they're very interested in, and then be able to engage around those things. So we'll do that at some other point, because
totally,
it's getting to be critically important if you want your content to last far beyond the last day of your event, whether it's face to face or virtual. So we got to get into that too.
By the way, and I never thought I would say this, but I'm going to, because I'm not a guy who pumps up AI at every opportunity. But as Brent and I have been talking about, this is a huge opportunity for AI. I think
Absolutely.
AI automating video editing. I think there's a big thing that can happen here. And there's a couple companies that are tiptoeing into it, but not to our satisfaction. So,
well, are you
continued.
talking about at enterprise
call 'em out.
scale or individually?
Enterprise scale.
I mean,
But it's the kind of thing where it could go down market, I think, to the point that Brent and you and I are at, where if we're doing a number of videos a month, we could have an AI service that chopped those videos into any number of distributable clips, for example. I'd like to give AI a shot when it comes down to that.
I mean, that's Brent. Brent, you have one company you're looking at that way, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to call them out yet because I don't know how good they are.
We are investigating.
Yes. There's also on the photography side, though, which actually will help you with just the formats. The companies like Luminar and Skylum, right? They have a product called Luminar AI, which is actually very good, and they have a new version of it coming out shortly called Luminar Neo, which is pretty advanced AI for photography and not terribly
Keanu Reeves
expensive.
do that one?
Yeah, he did. It was Luminar Neo Resurrected. That's
Neo
so. So look, frankly, I get all my inspiration on like great nuggets from Night at the Opera by the Marx Brothers. Pretty much all of it there.
Yeah, I love Carl and his brothers.
Yeah. See, that shows how little you know. He didn't have any brothers.
Oh well.
Jeez. We'll have to deal with that another time. I'll put you through some re-education.
Right. One thing that we don't have to ask, our typical question to end the show. We already know this dude is a big Pats fan, and we still let him on anyway. So
yeah,
thanks, guys.
It make you the singular exception.
Thanks, guys. I try not to do a lot of flag waving around it. Besides, we're going to get our butts kicked by Buffalo. So,
all right, I'm a Giants fan, so it doesn't really matter to me at all.
You ought to go to the game, man. It's going to be 0 degrees.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to catching that from the comfort of the couch, dude.
Which is the NFL's, by the way, general big problem, as we found out during seat days. Right, their biggest competitor was the couch.
There it is.
Yep.
All right,
thanks,
folks.
guys.
So on behalf of the bad boy of ERP, Jon Reed, I'm Brent Leary.
I'm Paul Greenberg.
Oh, you know what I did? I didn't have it queued up.
Oh, come on. 2 weeks in a row?
I know. Here we go. Here we go.
All
Sorry,
right.
Minnie. There it is. Now we can end the show.
Oh,
See you next week, folks.
bye, everyone.